Have you ever noticed what happens the moment you stop letting someone control you? They don't disappear. They don't walk away. They shift tactics. They get quieter, sneakier, and more calculated. Suddenly, it's not about controlling you anymore. It's about controlling the story about you. You stop being just a person in their life. You become a threat to the version of reality they need others to believe. This is where the real game begins. It's not just manipulation, it's narrative warfare. And here's the truth no one tells you. When someone who once held power over you loses that grip, they'll throw everything they have left to break you. Not your body, not your words, but your sense of self. You're watching Stoic Power Lab, your daily dose of timeless Stoic wisdom. Think about that. Have you ever walked away from someone toxic, only to find they suddenly had a lot to say about you behind closed doors? That they started painting you as the villain in a story you never even agreed to be in? That's not a coincidence. It's a survival strategy for them. And if you're not prepared, if you don't know what's really happening, it can make you question your truth. But here's what I've learned, and what I want to share with you today. You don't fight lies with panic. You fight them with presence. And this is where Stoic philosophy becomes more than just ancient wisdom. It becomes your armor. Because when the noise gets loud, when the attacks get personal, when the game goes underground, your greatest weapon is stillness, calm, clarity. Today, we're going deep. We're peeling back the layers of manipulation and uncovering the mental strategies that help you stay unshakable, no matter how dirty the tactics get. If you've ever been silenced, slandered, or made to feel crazy for standing your ground, this video is for you. Stick with me, because what you learn in the next few minutes might just be the power you didn't know you already had. Have you ever walked into a room, confident in who you are, only to leave questioning everything because of one comment? One look, one subtle jab disguised as a joke? That's not just workplace banter. That's not just teasing. That's public shaming. And it's one of the dirtiest, most manipulative tactics out there. See, when someone loses the power to control you in private, when the gaslighting, the guilt trips, the silent treatment all stop working, they take it public. Why? Because they're desperate. And desperation breeds cruelty. They want to humiliate you, not by screaming, not by confrontation, but through carefully crafted moments that make you look small in front of others. They don't want you to break in silence anymore. They want you to break in front of an audience. That way, they don't just control your confidence, they control the narrative. I've seen this up close. I once worked with a guy named Daniel. Brilliant mind, humble spirit, the kind of person who doesn't need to shout to be heard. But his quiet confidence threatened his manager, a man who craved control and couldn't stand that Daniel didn't bow to it. At first, it was small, backhanded compliments in private, fake mentoring that felt more like passive aggression. But Daniel didn't take the bait. He stayed composed. So the manager escalated. In team meetings, he'd call Daniel's ideas naive, laugh while he said it, like it was all in good fun. He'd roll his eyes when Daniel spoke. Subtle things, but enough to plant doubt, enough to make the room shift. If you've ever felt that shift, that moment where people stop looking at you the same way, you know how heavy it is. But Daniel never cracked. He didn't defend himself emotionally. He didn't try to win the crowd. He stayed factual, focused, calm. Over time, people started seeing through the act. The manager's smirk lost its power. Because when you don't react to public shaming, something amazing happens. It bounces back. And the shame? It sticks to the one who threw it. That's the heart of Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is worthless if none of them know the truth." Carl Jung called shame a soul-eating emotion. But here's the key. It only eats you if you feed it. Public humiliation is an attack on your identity, but you get to decide if it lands. When someone mocks you in front of others, they're not looking for a fight. They're looking for a reaction. because your reaction gives them power. But silence, self-control, unshaken clarity, that's power they can't touch. Stoicism teaches us that we can't control what others say, only what we do with it. You don't need to shout back. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to stand so solid, so deeply rooted in your truth, that the lie burns itself out. The crowd always catches up. It might take time, but they will see. And the ones who don't, they were never worth convincing in the first place. So the next time someone tries to embarrass you in public, remember, they're handing you a choice. You can carry their shame, or you can stand in your truth. Let them speak. Let them laugh. Let them project. But you don't move. You don't flinch. You lead, by example, by energy, by the kind of quiet strength no manipulation can ever shake. Have you ever walked away from a toxic person, a boss, a friend, a partner, thinking you finally found peace, only to discover they're now painting you as the villain? Suddenly, you're not the person who stood up for yourself. You're the selfish one, the cold one, the disloyal one. It's a twisted reversal, and it hurts more than we ever expect. Because instead of accepting that you outgrew their control, they rebrand themselves as the victim. And that's not by accident. It's strategy. Manipulators know they can't dominate you anymore, so they shift the game. Now they want to dominate how others see you. It's not about facts. It's about perception. And if you're not prepared, you might start to believe the lies yourself. I saw this happen to a friend of mine, Matt. For years, he carried a struggling business partnership on his back. He worked overtime, took on the hard clients, smoothed out every disaster while his partner soaked in the praise. But when Matt finally drew the line, demanded fairness, refused to clean up one more mess, he didn't get an apology. He got a whisper campaign. His partner started telling mutual contacts that Matt had changed, that he was harsh, ungrateful, impossible to work with. No direct attacks, just enough innuendo to make people doubt him. And the worst part? It worked for a while. Matt could have panicked. He could have gone to war to defend his name. But he didn't. He chose clarity over chaos. He kept showing up, kept delivering excellence, stayed grounded in who he was, even when others questioned him. And eventually, the truth broke through the fog. Because when someone plays the victim to gain power, they expose their weakness, not yours. And that's where Stoic wisdom comes in. Epictetus said, "He who blames others has a long way to go." And I believe that with everything in me. People who twist your strength into cruelty, who turn your boundaries into betrayal, they're not telling the truth. They're telling a story they need others to believe so they don't have to face themselves. But here's the most important thing. You don't need to correct every false narrative. You don't need to defend yourself in every room you're not in. You just need to stay you. Let your actions speak where your words are no longer welcome. Because real strength isn't loud. It doesn't chase validation. It stands still in the storm, knowing time is on its side. If someone's love or respect disappears the moment you stop being convenient to them, that was never love. It was ownership disguised as connection. And when they lose control, they'll weaponize empathy to make you feel guilty for growing. Don't fall for it. If you're walking through this right now, if someone's playing the victim while trying to isolate you, remember this. You are not cruel for having boundaries. You are not broken for walking away. You are not the villain in someone else's story just because you stopped playing a role that kept you small. Let them talk. Let them twist. But don't let them turn your truth into doubt. Stand in it. Stay consistent. Stay strong. Because the truth doesn't chase people, it waits. And in time, it always outlasts the noise. Have you ever felt something shift around you, but you couldn't quite explain why? People stop looking at you the same way. Conversations get colder. You sense tension in the room, but no one says anything directly. That, right there, is the effect of subtle lies. It's not war, it's whispers. And it can be even more damaging than direct attacks. Because it's invisible, it's quiet. It seeps into people's minds without warning. When a manipulator realizes they can no longer control you, they move to control how others see you. And they don't do it by accusing, they do it by suggesting. I don't know, something just feels off about her lately. Or, he's changed, don't you think? It sounds harmless. But those tiny, vague comments plant seeds. And if left unchecked, those seeds grow into doubt, into suspicion, into a narrative that starts to define you, even when it's completely false. This is psychological warfare at its most subtle. They don't distort your character with slander. They distort your presence with silence. And ironically, they count on your silence, too. Because the truth doesn't run. It waits. And in the meantime, the lie spreads. I've seen this happen countless times, in families, in friend groups, in workplaces. I once worked with someone who smiled to my face and complimented my work in meetings. But behind the scenes, they were quietly saying I was hard to collaborate with. Not directly, not to my face, just enough so people started wondering. I'd walk into a room and feel it, that subtle shift in energy, that unspoken, did I miss something, feeling. It's disorienting. It makes you question your own instincts. And that's the goal. Because manipulators don't need proof, they just need momentum. They twist your words just enough to sound believable. They change the tone, not the facts. They won't say you're dangerous. They'll say, just be careful. They won't call you unstable. They'll say, something seems different. And once that doubt settles into people's minds, it can be incredibly hard to reverse. Because when we're not given the full story, our brains fill in the blanks. It's human nature, and manipulators exploit that. They rely on the fact that lies spread faster than truth, because lies are emotional. They ignite fear, curiosity, and drama. Truth, on the other hand, asks for patience. It's calm. It doesn't demand attention, and that's why it moves slower. Seneca said, truth is simple. Lies require complication. And Mark Twain reminded us that a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. This isn't just philosophy, this is real life. So what do you do when you sense that subtle campaign against you? When your name is being twisted behind closed doors, but no one confronts you directly? You don't chase every rumor. You don't run from room to room proving yourself. That's what they want. They want you panicked, distracted, exhausted. That's their trap, not the lie itself, but your reaction to it. You fight back by doing the one thing they hate, staying calm, staying consistent, staying excellent. Because when people watch you long enough, the truth begins to shine through. They start to notice the gaps between the lie and your actual character. The more the manipulator twists, the more obvious their desperation becomes. But only if you don't give in to it. You don't need to defend yourself in places you haven't been invited. You don't need to explain who you are to people committed to misunderstanding you. You just need to live in a way that makes the lies look ridiculous over time. And that takes strength. That takes clarity. But most of all, it takes belief in yourself when the noise gets loud. The truth doesn't shout. It stands. And when the lies burn out, and they will, the truth is still standing. That's your power. That's your legacy. So if someone is trying to rewrite your story in whispers, don't scream. Don't chase. Just keep writing your truth so boldly that the lies eventually fade into background noise. And the right people, the people who truly matter, they'll see you. They always do. Have you ever looked around and realized the people who used to check in don't anymore? Invitations stop. Conversations feel colder. Suddenly, the group chat is quiet, at least for you. And the worst part? You can't point to one thing that caused it. That's not a coincidence. That's isolation. And when it's engineered by someone else, someone who once had control over you, it becomes one of the most silent, brutal tools of manipulation. Because they're not just trying to hurt your feelings, They're trying to cut you off from your anchors. They know if you're surrounded by people who see your worth, you'll stay strong. But if they can quietly remove your support system, they can make you doubt your own reality. You see, manipulators don't always come for you with obvious attacks. That would be too easy to spot. Instead, they go for the people around you. One comment here, one concern there. I don't know. She's been acting different since the promotion. Or, I just worry he's getting overwhelmed. It sounds innocent, even caring. But it's not. It's a calculated attempt to make others see you through a distorted lens. And it works. You don't even realize what's happening until one day you feel alone in a room full of people who used to feel like home. That's how psychological isolation operates. Not with walls, but with whispers. I think of Rachel. She was a rising star in her company, promoted ahead of a colleague who thought he deserved the role. That's when it began. Subtle changes. Projects that used to land on her desk now went elsewhere. People stopped sharing things they once would have brought to her first. Meetings felt cold, energy shifted, and nobody could quite explain why. But she knew, and she didn't fight it by confronting every person or demanding explanations. She held the line. She stayed rooted in what made her great, her integrity, her work ethic, her clarity. And in time, not right away, but over time, the fog lifted. People started to notice the difference between the narrative and the reality. Because manipulation might move fast, but truth endures. Seneca once said, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." In other words, if someone's trying to isolate you from those who bring out your best, that's not protection. That's control. And Machiavelli, with his cold brilliance, revealed the deeper truth. Whoever controls the story controls the person. That's what isolation is really about. Not just removing people from your life, but removing you from your own sense of truth by limiting who can affirm it. So if you're in this situation, if you feel like you've been pushed out of circles you used to belong to, breathe. Don't chase. Don't spiral. And don't let it turn you against yourself. The people who are meant for you, the real ones, they will see you. They will find their way back. Your only job is to stay solid until they do. The greatest resistance to isolation is not anger, it's alignment. Keep showing up as the best version of yourself, even when it feels like no one is watching. Because eventually, the lies fall flat, the fog clears, and the manipulator loses control. Not because you shouted louder, but because you never stopped being you. And that's power no one can take. Have you ever said yes when everything inside you screamed no, simply because you felt guilty? Not because it was the right thing to do, not because you agreed, but because you didn't want to disappoint someone or be seen as cold, ungrateful, or selfish. That's not kindness. That's manipulation. And guilt, when used the wrong way, is one of the most effective weapons in emotional control. When a manipulator realizes they can't sway you with logic, when your boundaries are too strong for direct confrontation, they pivot to guilt. They don't need to raise their voice. All it takes is a sigh, a passive-aggressive, "I guess you don't care anymore," a disappointed look that lingers longer than it should. Suddenly, you become the problem. Your growth is framed as abandonment, your boundaries as betrayal, and your freedom as proof you're not who they thought you were. But here's the truth. They're not doing this because you hurt them. They're doing it because they lost control. And instead of processing that like an adult, they try to drag you back with guilt. Why? Because guilt only works on people with a conscience. Manipulators know this. They know you care. They know you try hard to be good, to be fair, to give people the benefit of the doubt. And instead of respecting that, they exploit it. Guilt becomes the leash they pull when reason fails. I remember a story about a guy named Chris. He had always been the reliable one in his family, the one who showed up, the one who never said no. But one day, he got a dream job offer across the country. And for once, He chose himself. He made the move, ready to start fresh. But instead of support, his phone blew up with guilt. Messages like, "After everything we've done for you," or, "I guess your career means more than your family now." No threats, no screaming, just enough emotional pressure to make him question his decision. And for a moment, it worked. He almost gave up the opportunity. But one night, something clicked. He asked himself, "If this love is real, why does it feel like a chain around my neck?" That one question changed everything. Chris stopped explaining, stopped apologizing for wanting more. He didn't slam doors. He didn't fight. He simply stopped carrying guilt that was never his to begin with. Because here's the thing, love doesn't guilt you into submission. Real connection doesn't make you feel small for choosing yourself. And anyone who does isn't protecting the relationship. They're protecting their control. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that includes being the master of your emotions, especially the ones planted there by someone else. Guilt is not always a sign of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's just a sign that someone else is uncomfortable with your growth. And that's not your burden to carry. So the next time someone says, "I guess you don't care anymore," look at what you're doing. Are you walking toward a healthier life? Are you honoring your peace? Are you protecting your energy? If the answer is yes, then maybe, just maybe, their pain is not your problem to fix. You're not cold. You're not selfish. You're finally free. And that, my friend, is something no guilt trip can take away from you. Have you ever found yourself second-guessing something you used to feel so sure about? Maybe a decision, an idea, or even your own worth. You used to walk into a room with confidence. You used to speak up without rehearsing your every word in your head. And then, slowly, subtly, that certainty started to slip. Not because you failed, but because someone planted a quiet seed of doubt. That's not coincidence. That's manipulation. And it's one of the most toxic forms of control, undermining your confidence from the inside out. See, when manipulators realize they can't control you directly anymore, when you've gotten too strong, too clear, too independent, they go for your inner voice. They don't need to tell you what to do. They just need to make you question yourself enough that you hesitate and then defer. Again and again. It starts with sarcasm disguised as concern. "Wow, that's ambitious." Or, "Are you sure that's the right move?" Sometimes it's masked as backhanded praise. "You did well this time." At first, you brush it off. But over time, those comments stick. You begin to internalize their doubts. Their voice becomes your inner monologue. And soon, it's not them making you small, you're doing it to yourself. That's the real damage. Not the words they speak out loud, but the ones they make you say in your own mind. And here's the truth no one likes to talk about. Even the strongest minds can be shaken by enough quiet, persistent erosion. I've seen people go from confident leaders to hesitant shells, not because they lacked talent, but because someone convinced them they were too much, too risky, or not quite ready. And the worst part? It often comes from people you trust. People close enough to hurt you subtly. Friends, partners, even mentors. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's their own insecurity speaking. But whether intentional or not, the impact is the same. They chip away at your belief in yourself until it collapses. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And Naval Ravikant put it even more directly. The first step in breaking a strong mind is convincing it that it's already broken. But here's the good news. If someone had the power to convince you of a lie, you have the power to unlearn it. You have the power to reclaim your voice, to rebuild that confidence, not from compliments or external approval, but from a deep, grounded truth about who you are. You don't have to shout it. You don't have to prove it. You just have to stop believing them and start trusting you. Ask yourself, Where in your life have you started shrinking to make someone else feel bigger? Where have you stayed small because their doubt felt louder than your truth? And then ask this: what would change if you stopped asking for permission? What would happen if, today, you decided to believe in your own voice again, even if no one clapped for it yet? Because that's what real confidence is. Not arrogance, not noise, but quiet certainty, even when the world gets loud. So if someone's trying to wear you down with little comments, subtle jabs, or fake concern, recognize it. And don't shrink. Rise. You are not broken. You are being tested. And when you choose to believe in yourself anyway, that's the beginning of freedom. Let me ask you something real. Have you ever had someone come back into your life? Not with blame, not with manipulation, but with softness? They say all the right things. They apologize. They say they've changed. They say they finally see what you were trying to tell them all along. And for a moment, you believe them. Because deep down, a part of you wants to. You want peace. You want closure. You want to believe that the pain you went through meant something, that it led to transformation. But here's the hard truth. Not every "I'm sorry" is real. Sometimes, it's just a new strategy. When every other form of control fails, when guilt, gaslighting, public shaming, and isolation no longer work, manipulators go for their final card: fake reconciliation. They don't come back to own their behavior. They come back to regain their position. But this time, they do it with charm, with language they've borrowed from your healing. They mirror your growth. They talk about boundaries. They say they understand. But underneath that new tone, it's still about them. Their need for control. Their fear of being irrelevant in your life. And if you're not careful, if you let that softness blind you to the patterns, you'll find yourself right back in the same cycle. Only now it's sneakier, because they've studied you. They know how to speak your language now. They know how to wear your trust like a costume. And just when you start to let your guard down, it begins again. Subtle comments, emotional hooks, quiet tests to see if you're still willing to compromise yourself to keep the peace. But this time, it's harder to spot, because they're not shouting. They're whispering. And that whisper sounds a lot like love. But love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't need to perform. Real change isn't poetic, it's consistent. It shows up over time, not in one well-written apology. Epictetus once said, "He who does not observe deceit is not truly wise." That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Forgiveness can be powerful. You can forgive. You can release the anger. You can choose peace for yourself. But wisdom is in remembering what you've already seen. Because a snake that sheds its skin is still a snake. A new tone doesn't mean a new heart. And if the only thing that's changed is their approach, not their character, then they're not seeking reconciliation, they're seeking re-entry. So what do you do when this happens? You pause. You breathe. You watch. You don't rush back into old dynamics because the door suddenly looks nicer. You give their actions time to reveal whether they've truly changed, or if they've just changed tactics. And most importantly, you trust the version of yourself who walked away the first time. That version of you wasn't confused. That version wasn't cruel. That version saw something clearly, even when it hurt. Don't betray that clarity just because someone finally said the words you needed to hear months or even years ago. Some people apologize to feel better. Others apologize to do better. The difference is in what they do when you don't immediately say, "I forgive you." Do they respect your space? Or do they start shifting blame again? Do they honor your boundaries? Or do they slowly test them? Do they support your independence? Or quietly try to pull you back into their control? You'll know. Your gut knows. Your past knows. Trust that. Because strength isn't just about walking away once. It's about not letting the same pattern wrap itself in new language and walk back through your door. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they finally figured out how to sound sincere. Protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And never forget, You didn't grow through all that pain just to let it walk back in wearing a prettier mask. You know what real strength looks like. It's not loud. It's not explosive. It's not about clapping back or proving a point. Real strength, the kind that scares manipulators, is silent, steady, and unshakable. It's when you don't respond the way they expect. You don't fight. You don't explain. You don't perform for their approval. And in that stillness, you take your power back. See, the moment you stop reacting on their terms, you break the cycle. You no longer play the role they cast you in. And that terrifies them. Because now, they can't control the story, and they can't control you. Here's the truth. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need to defend your peace. You don't need permission to live a life rooted in clarity and self-respect. You owe no one your silence, your loyalty, or your future just because they once had a place in your past. You're not cold for choosing calm. You're not selfish for choosing growth. You're free, and that freedom didn't come easy. You fought for it, quietly, bravely, by refusing to betray yourself. So the next time someone tries to pull you back into the storm, remind yourself, you are the calm. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to argue to be right. Let them say what they want. Let them twist, spin, and play the game. But you stand still. You stay grounded. You keep building a life so steady, so real, so true, that nothing they say can shake it. Because at the end of the day, truth doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. And that is your final power. That's your quiet victory. So own it, live it, and never hand it over again. If this video helped you, let it echo. Like, share, subscribe for more insights, and keep building your inner power.